Good morning.
Good morning.
Ooh, I like it. My name is Charlotte Caples, and I'm a representative of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. I do live here in Austin with you all, and I want to go ahead and apologize in advance. I am a cedar-fugal sufferer, and so I am completely congested and all the works that come with that. So excuse me for my coughing and all that comes with that in advance. I'm not contagious. So I am a representative of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Has anyone heard of the People's Institute? What do you know about the People's Institute?
This, basically.
Yeah, from last time I spoke with you.
So we've talked a little bit before. Okay, so for all the people who don't know, the People's Institute, and we'll say the People's Institute or the Institute or PSAB for short, we get all kind of acronyms. The People's Institute was started in 1980 by two gentlemen. I like to say Dr. Ronald Chisholm, but he is not officially a doctor, and the late Dr. Jim Dunn. They were two young African-American men who traveled the country doing things much like what we're doing this morning, sitting in conferences, going to retreats, and they always bumped into each other. Jim was actually located in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and Ron Chisholm is in New Orleans. Have anybody heard of the neighborhood called Treme?
Oh, yeah.
Ron is an activist, a community organizer for the community of Treme in New Orleans, Louisiana. He was a part of the series that came on Treme. But as they kept bumping into each other at these conferences, they realized they had very similar stories. They realized that in both of their communities, people of color were struggling and barely just trying to survive. And so what they decided to do was to work together about how they could organize to make things a little bit different for their own communities. And so they created the People's Institute for Survival. And you know, after a few years of working and doing some things together, they realized, man, we got to do more than just survive. It's a bigger, better world out there. And so they extended the name to and beyond. So now we're known as the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. It's a nonprofit organization of community organizers and educators. The People's Institute has more than 50 trainers that conduct a workshop called Undoing Racism. Today, I will give you an introduction to Undoing Racism. It is actually a 2.5-day workshop, 2-day or 2.5-day workshop in which we work on, as a collective, gaining our humanity. We believe that everyone has been dehumanized by this thing called race in this country. And that if racism was something that was done to us, that we can undo it. And so we spend a couple of days together sitting in a similar fashion, except there wouldn't be people on the wall. We'd all be in a great big circle together. And so I tried to emulate that in this room as much as I could. But what we would do is actually spend a couple of days going through some of the activities that we'll do today. You know, the People's Institute provides this training. It's a proprietary workshop. It has been done all over this country, in several other countries, Africa, England, Puerto Rico, Asia, you name it, it's been done. And in most communities in the United States, the People's Institute has been invited in as well. One of the things that I like about the People's Institute is that we don't ever go where we're not invited. So race and racism can be a hard discussion to have, but when we're present, it's because people like you have said, we have a need, and we want you to come in and assist us. So I wish that Ron could be here with us today. He is a character. He's my best buddy. I love him to death. He is very active, and you can't keep up with him. He's just one of those characters that's always on the go. Wonderful. I teased about him being doctor because he was working with Dr. Dunn. And, you know, it's a little precocious when you're standing next to someone who can call themselves doctor. and you're just a community member. And so Ron has some traits to where he would learn different things at various conferences, and in the process of putting together the Undoing Racism workshop, that he would be able to go back to his community and present himself as if he has some letters behind his name too. So one of the main things, in order to undo racism, we have to know what's been done. There's some history that has happened in this country that created race, the construct of race. We didn't always have race, right? How were people identified back in biblical days? Say it again. Jews and Gentiles.
Hittites and Cushites and
Friends.
By your families, by where you were from, by your profession, what you did for a living. We weren't identified by race. That is something that was created in the United States. And since then, it is something that other people have come to study and take back to their countries. Does anybody know of some examples of places that have come to the United States and studied race and racism and went back and implemented it in their country? There's two. What is it?
And took it back.
Who studied race and racism in this country? Nazi Germany and Hitler
South Africa.
and South Africa, apartheid. Came and learned from us and took it back and did things in their country. And we talk about the horrific things that have happened in those places all the time. But we never think about those things that happen in this country and that continue to happen. So we have to know our history. We have to know what was done before we could ever undo racism. A lot of times we talk about empowering people. Well, if we don't know how they were disempowered, we'll never be able to empower them. So we believe it's imperative that we learn our history. And a part of the Undoing Racism workshop goes through the history and development of race in this country. One of the things that we absolutely love to do is understand our culture. We all have a culture, right? Yes. If you didn't know, we all have a culture. You all were very akin to one of my cultures. Things of my culture is that when you walk into a room, you speak. You all spoke wonderfully. That's a part of my culture. And so, and as a United Methodist Church, you have a culture of prayer, right? You begin a service with prayer, and you may end it with prayer. That's part of your culture for the church. And so we believe in sharing culture with each other so we can learn more about each other. Because if you don't know the person that you sit next to, it's pretty hard to work together on some things as difficult as race and racism. We believe in developing leadership. So there's this connotation or this notion that leaders are not born or are born. Well, we believe everybody can be a leader. We believe that it's imperative that everybody is a leader in this work. If you think about the history of the social justice movement, what's the one thing that stops a movement? Killing the leader. When there is one person who's in charge or who's running or has the most visibility, then take that person out. It's one of the strategies to stop a movement easily. So what we believe is that everybody has a role to play in undoing racism. These principles is not for just the pastor to know and give to you. If the pastor doesn't show up and we're working on racism, anybody in this room ought to be able to take it and run with it. So we believe it's imperative to develop leadership. And when we think about generational gaps, it's not new to us. Some of the things that my ancestors and elders did are not necessarily natural for me. But I have to learn from them what they did. And the reverse of that is they also have to understand some of the things that I have going on in my world today, like technology. That's one of, I do some other training, and that's one of the big generational gaps, being able to function with technology. And, but that's what we need to work together. maintaining accountability is one of the probably, I don't want to say the hardest, but is imperative or is necessary that we maintain accountability to the people that we serve. So it could be that as a pastor or a leader within your church, who's going to pull your shirt tail to say, did the Bible really say that, or is that just your interpretation of it? Who's bold enough to do that? Takes a bold person to step up and say, hey, I don't think that that's quite the way things need to be happening, and we're going to do things differently. So maintaining accountability to communities, work communities, communities of color. If your congregation is, if your church is in the middle of a neighborhood, but the people aren't in that neighborhood aren't allowed or to participate in your congregation, who's holding you accountable? So we believe that those people will be able to, should be able to hold you accountable for the things that we do. Networking. You talked about introducing ourselves. That's a great piece to networking. We're sitting very close to each other in this room. We need to, when we leave out of this room, be just as connected to each other. So we're actually going to go through an exercise a little bit in the workshop, a little bit in this session to start building networks. And we believe that it's not just networking, it's about building a net that works. It's about being able to go to a person when you have questions or you have a need, or you can't be heard at this meeting, but you have a relationship with someone who can step in and build and connect you. So we do believe in networking or building a net that works, and we have a network all over the country. There are satellite offices all over. Seattle has a satellite office. Headquarters is in New Orleans, if I didn't say that. Seattle, Washington, D.C., New York. Who did I miss? We hope to. I was about to say, we hope to have a satellite office right here in Austin. This work has been happening in Texas since 2005. It began with Child Protective Services, bringing in the People's Institute to address the disparities and disproportionality that we were seeing amongst the children in child welfare. Children of color not being adopted, children of color being removed from their homes at higher rates than other children, children of color remaining in the system longer than any other. Children dropping out of school. So we were able to pull some numbers and actually see those things happening here. And if you haven't done any type of data analysis for your congregation or the people that you work with, we encourage you to do so. It's a part of that what that Jasmine talked about, but we'll get to the why as well. We believe in analyzing power. Who maintains it? Who holds power? And how is that power shared? And so we can, everybody probably would have a different definition of power, but we talk about access when we talk about power. Heal from internalized racial oppression. I talked about all of us being dehumanized. Well, there are certain ways that dehumanization shows up. It shows up in two forms: internalized racial superiority for white people and internalized racial inferiority for black people and other people of color. And basically that is an arrangement that is set up to have white on top and people of color at the bottom. And we actually maintain that in most of the things that we do. And so we believe that we have to heal from that and balance out those manifestations. Reshape gatekeeping. Everybody in this room is a gatekeeper in some fashion. A holder of the gate, a keeper of the gate, some type of information resources. Be it that you're a parent and you keep your children from doing certain things or getting certain information at a certain time, or if you're a supervisor and you decide which jobs go to where and whose families are served. all of us play a role in gatekeeping. And gatekeeping isn't a bad thing. The point is to be an accountable gatekeeper. So that when you're holding resources, who can say, share a little bit of that so that we all can have the information. And then we identify and analyze manifestations of racism. With this, we tend to talk about cultural racism and militarism that happens with us. And so we make it a point to go through these. These are the anti-racist principles. We believe that this is the foundation of everything we do. During the workshop, we actually go through these and do an activity or some type of section to talk about each one of these. But I wanted to give them to you up front just because we have an hour and a half and we're not going to go through all of those activities. But know that this is when we walk away from the Undoing Racism workshop, that these are the things that we choose and want to embody in our practices and what we do. Questions, comments, concerns, expressions? So I'm going to take you through one of the first things that we do when we come into an Undoing Racism workshop. And that's actually to develop a contract. So how many of you have tried to have a conversation about race before? How was it?
Kind of one-sided.
One-sided?
Because you discuss it with certain people.
Okay.
Certain things you won't discuss with everybody.
All right. Okay. Who else?
Too many people who look the same, especially in my experience. That a lot of the conversations we've been having have been to people who look just like us, and I feel like it's not super helpful.
Okay. I was going to say I've had several good discussions, I think, in like a master's program. So it's kind of like, people were maybe more open to discussion, I guess, about it. And some of the times they came up and it wasn't the intended topic, but it just sort of went there. So they were good.
It went well. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'd have to say that most of the time my conversations, racism and race have come with people questioning my point of view on it, which is a scientific point of view that there is no such thing as race. And that's been a label that's been created, that has created the problems that follow down from that. Most of the time, I come up with people that don't understand the fact that there is no such thing as race. So that's probably my exposure to when I talk about my feelings about it.
So it's a little difficult.
Yeah, because I think it's because the concept of race has been so deeply rooted in our society for years, for decades, centuries, literally, that people accept the term race as being a factual term when it really isn't.
The social construct.
Right.
It is, but it's still very real, and it's difficult. You want to share?
Yeah, I have two experiences. One, teaching high school or Sunday school for several years, and every once in a while we get race. And the perspective I want to share is that generally when you bring racism to the youth, they kind of go like, what problem is that? Basically, they don't understand it.
Yeah.
Why is that an issue? So that's just a perspective.
Yeah.
And the second one is social media and Facebook. And there's a lot of people that I just, friends and my wife and I, when she doesn't hear something she doesn't like, she turns them off and unfriends them. And I always I keep them as friends, but I don't agree with them. But so the question, how do you deal with that on social media? Because I don't like a lot of the stuff I see and hear.
That goes back to that accountability thing. First, having an understanding, why people believe what they believe and how we all were socialized to believe certain things. So I don't know about y'all, but some of the worst arguments I have ever had were around race and racism. It didn't go well. Some of them people you don't even speak to afterwards, or there's some type of animosity. So when we do a workshop, we want to make sure that everybody in here stays connected to the network. And so we establish some ground rules in having a conversation about race. What do you think some of those things would need to be? Respect. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, just that respecting the other person for being a human being and having a brain and being able to think and if they're, and this is where it gets hard, when they're disagreeing with you, still being able to respect them and give them that kind of respect.
We don't always have the same life experiences that creates our picture or our view. So being able to respect that someone is different than you in their beliefs. Excuse me. What else?
Listening.
Listening.
Jasmine said in there that trying to understand somebody before you expect to be understood. That was something I wrote down. It's very interesting.
We live in such a society of sound bites that, to me, yeah, which I think causes a lot of issues because people will just jump off of one sound bite without trying to understand. So I think that's, especially what the seek to understand is a big piece of it, and not just jump to like, oh, I heard this, so it must be true kind of thing, but really kind of dig into it and really understand for yourself and be able to make those decisions. So understanding that people come from different points of view and not just take what someone told us and try to spit that out, because that usually causes an issue.
Go ahead.
I'll say another thing to piggyback on both of those is that when you're having a discussion, that you don't kill the messenger. That the messenger is the person that's actually giving you what they've heard, what they've dealt with, and it becomes such an enraging thing to where it's like you're on that person before you know it, as though they said it, as though that's their attitude. So an attitude of not killing the messenger, of like listening to what they say, as in you would have said the same thing if you're trying to convey the message.
Okay.
All you're doing is you're just bringing the message.
Okay. It's about not formulating ideas in your head while somebody else is talking. Truly active, we call it active listening, truly hearing what that person is saying versus developing your rebuttal because you don't agree, or comparing your life experience to what they're saying. You're not really listening. So yes, listening is an important aspect that we develop in our contract.
Most of us have been in small group studies, and one of the problems I guess we face is they tend to be dominated sometimes by one or two voices in the study. And so one of the rules that I've tried to institute, somewhat unsuccessfully, are one is if you've already spoken one time, the next time you jump in and speak, ask a question of somebody who hasn't spoken yet and say, hey, Terrell, you haven't said anything. What do you think? Or, something like that. And then also observing that 5-second rule that I think relates to what you're talking about, which is instead of just jumping in, but just let everybody kind of think for a minute and let it sink in, and then, so.
What about, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it goes with some of what's already been said, but understanding where their racism comes from, we were talking about. I think sometimes it comes from fear, not fearing someone who's different, whether it's race, religion, whatever. We see someone who's different and we don't understand them and we fear them. And I think if we understand that some of it comes from fear, it might be easier to deal with it.
Okay, good. Did you want to add?
I was going to say the same thing. We don't know everyone's background or history, the way they were raised, or the community in which they grew up, and that kind of impacts how they believe. Just recognizing that and helping them to gain an understanding rather than dismissing them because they don't agree with you.
Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
Withholding judgment.
Okay. It's imperative in having a conversation that you hold that back. Because people feel our judgments, right? Whether or not we communicate them or not. I know I have a very expressive face. It comes with it being a part of my culture. I'm from Mississippi. What comes up comes out voluntarily or involuntarily. So I tell people you can see things happening on my face, but please ask me because it might not be what you think it is. So don't judge. Ask me the question of what's going on. Okay? What else do we need to have a conversation about race?
I think we need to respect or be mindful of the power that we're bringing to the table. And in any conversation, people come to the table, metaphorical table, with some sort of power. And I think being mindful of our own power and mindful of how some other people might not feel empowered is important in any conversation.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we have a very defined list of things that we actually ask people to agree to in order to participate in the workshop. I think that you all have a good grasp on them, but I'm going to go over them. In every workshop you go to, they're going to do this, develop a contract. So very easily, you all got listen to each other. One of the things that I think you're hitting on, and I think you hit on as well, is this is a liberated zone. This is a space where if you have a question and you don't understand, that you can ask it in this room. And that there's no judgment about you asking it, because 9 times out of 10, somebody else may have had the very same question that you had, but we're too afraid to ask that question. So in this space, we ask that you talk about it in here instead of going on break and telling people how you didn't agree with what just was said. Bring it back in here. Let's have a conversation about what's going on. Respect each other. I think you all covered that. One of the things that we ask, though, is to trust the process. So this is a process in learning about racism and how to undo racism. And we believe that everything that happens doesn't happen by happenstance or circumstance. It's no coincidence that you make what comments that you make. It was supposed to happen in this space. Whatever came up for you was supposed to come up for you. And we ask that you trust the process, that over 2.5 days that we're going to actually walk you through some activities. We're not going to slap you in the face with race and racism on the first day. We're actually going to take you through some things to build up an understanding. Because we recognize that it's difficult to talk about race and racism. And we just ask that you trust the process that we go through. And experience discomfort. You talked about that fear. It's good. Feel it. Sit there, pause for a little bit. Understand what you're feeling, first of all. And then ask yourself, wow, what's that about? I'm sweating. Y'all ever been in a room, somebody say something, and you just kind of start sweating? You can feel yourself. And it's like, what happened then? I don't know what that was about. So we ask you to experience that discomfort. Actually pay attention and recognize what's happening with you. And we actually call, when you experience that discomfort, we call it your growing edge. We believe that being in that place of discomfort allows you to hear or to receive some information that will help you grow, that will help you get over some hurdle that you may be experiencing. We're going to struggle together in this room. Not one of us has all of the answers. We didn't do it, but we're responsible for undoing it. And no matter what comes up and what comes out, we have to commit to struggle together. Because if I get my toys and go home, what happens? We're no longer having that network that we need each other. What you talked about earlier, we call it participate. Everybody will participate, voluntarily or involuntarily. We don't think it's fair that you get to sit in this space and hear everybody else's thoughts and opinions and not share of your own. And we want to hear from everybody. And over the course of 2.5 days, you wouldn't believe the people that sit in the corner and think that we missed them, like they're invisible. Nobody's invisible to us. So we will check in with you to see. And so we ask everybody to participate. One of the things that we do is focus on racism. Racism right here in the United States, Texas, specifically we're here in Austin. And we focus on racism, not sexism, not classism, none of those other isms, except when they intersect with racism. Because it's easier for us to talk about classism than it is for us to talk about race and racism. So we keep this focus on racism. A lot of times what we find is women will say, well, I don't know that that's a problem. That just happens to black people. I'm a woman and I felt oppressed about some things. Well, we're not negating that that's true. But in this room, it's undoing racism. So we will talk about how sexism intersects with racism. but the focus will stay on racism. And we don't want to talk about racism over in Africa because they're going to solve their problems, and we're going to have to work on our own. Stay engaged. That means physically, mentally, spiritually. Don't check out on us. Sometimes people have a problem with staying in the room. You know that uncomfortable feeling you just gotta fidget, and then you just fidget right on out the door and never come back. We miss you when you leave, so we want you to stay engaged. We want you to participate and be a part of the conversation. Turn off your cell phones, put them on vibrate. We understand, things come up and things do happen, but we want you to intentionally stay engaged with the conversation, because when you check out, that's not experiencing the discomfort. That's you quitting and backing out. And we want you to stay engaged. There's no quick fix to undoing racism. It didn't happen yesterday. We're not going to fix it today. So there's going to be a process that we'll have to go through to fix what has been done over centuries. So understand that sometimes, we hear a little piece and it's like, I'm going back to my church and I'm going to do this, and that's going to fix this. Well, not so fast. It may, but it may also create some other things. So we ask that you sit on the need to do something. It's natural. We're solution-oriented people, but we ask you to sit on it, hold it, continue through the process, and there's actually a piece in our organizing work where we do talk about strategies and tactics to change some things. We say that there's no hierarchy in the room. Everybody has a voice. A lot of times we do the workshop and supervisors in the room. Your pastors may be in the room. And you think that they should be the spokesperson. I get it. I go to a Baptist church. I can't speak. My pastor, I'm going to introduce my pastor. Now, if he relinquishes speaking rights to me, fine. But no hierarchy in this space. We come to you with expertise about racism because we've been working on it for the past 30 plus years, but we don't come to you as an expert. We don't have the answer for your problem. We don't claim to. We know that it's going to take some work. We might play a role in helping you get there, but we don't necessarily have all of the answers. And I talked about experiencing your growing edge, staying with it. So at this point, if you believe that you can agree to all of these things on this contract, will you raise your hand to indicate so? You don't know if you can do it? You can put your hands down. You don't know. We get that. We get this. Because we don't know, people don't necessarily want to commit to this, or they don't know what it's going to look like. I might change my mind midway through this. Don't worry, we'll help bring you back to the contract if you get off track. So we literally, and if there are people who, and also when I said stay engaged, we ask people to stay the entire 2.5 days. It's not a workshop where you can leave for half a day and come back and think you can get back into the conversation. So we literally have people who have things come up or their calendars at work, pull them away. We ask them, if you can't participate, we ask them to participate at a different time. So it is mandatory. So I joke with you about not raising your hand, but it's all good. All right, so now we're gonna do a little activity that we actually do in the workshop. It's called introductions. So what I want you to do is we're gonna go around the room. We're actually gonna introduce ourselves. I want you to tell me who you are. Tell us who you are, what do you do, and why is it important or urgent for you to undo racism? And this gets back to Miss Jasmine's why. This is that passion thing that keeps you in this work, doing what you were put here to do. So, who would like to start?
I'll start since I brought it up earlier.
Okay.
My name is Glenn Suchin. I'm a member of Leander United Methodist Church. What do I do? As a profession, I work at the University of Texas in the Department of Physics, doing the purchasing for research equipment. Why is it important for me to be involved with this seminar on undoing racism? I kind of touched on it a little bit before. As a college-age student, I studied anthropology out of a personal interest, and through that study, I became totally aware of the fact that people look differently, have different features, only because of where they have ancestrally lived, and it's an environmental impact. And there is no difference between a person living in South Africa and a person living in Norway and a person living in China and a person living in Australia. They're all the same. It's just where they live that their body adapts so that they can survive in those environments. And we have come to call that racism. We've come to label those differences in people as race. And that's why I feel I need to be here for the seminar.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for modeling as well. This is one of those activities that we want to keep short. We want you to tell us why in 2 to 3 words. No, you're good. You're good. But we want to keep it concise, your why. Okay, who's next? I saw somebody's hand was up back there earlier. Okay.
Nina Hewitt. I am a creative person, so I do all kinds of stuff. Don't really have a job. And I don't understand racism. I mean, I see things on Facebook and I'm like, I know this is wrong, but I don't exactly know why. And I want to know how to approach it and love these people, but still be able to help undo racism.
Robert Waddle, pastor at Simpson United Methodist Church, and my why is because I love all people. And I need to understand why hatred is so deep in people.
Okay.
My name is Brenda Johnson. I'm from Berkeley United Methodist Church. I'm a retired nurse. So in my field of endeavor when I was working, you had to be able to handle everyone on an equal basis. There's no room for racism as such. And I think racism is a learned behavior that is contraindicated by the Holy Gospel. That's my personal opinion. I could be wrong.
All right, thank you. Next. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jo Kratzler. I'm a member at St. John's UNC. What I do, I tutor Latin. I'm in the candidacy process to become a pastor at the United Methodist Church. Undoing racism is important is because every person on earth matters to God and should matter to us.
Nancy Clark, I go to Terrytown United Methodist. My profession, the CFO for the Department of Insurance. But I also am a board member for the Free Store. And I think that's as far as why. I try to live by Micah 6:8 and to walk humbly, to seek justice and to love mercy. And so that's why.
I'm Gina Harris, Wesley United Methodist Church. I'm a pharmacist. And why it's important is because witnessing how so many assumptions are made just upon sight. When you present yourself for medical care, what's going to happen, what's going to be offered, just on how you look.
My name's Barbara Gordy. I'm a retired nurse. I'm also recently took over chairmanship of the Mission and Evangelism Committee. Why is because I'm hoping that we can reach out into our community and other communities as well. And we need to be able to understand these communities and where they're coming from to be able to really help in their needs.
I'm
Pat Milliken. I'm a retired attorney, so I don't do anything.
The life.
I've lived in this area. I go to a very, very small country church, and I've lived in the same place all my life, basically. But why this is important or urgent for me is I've watched my community, my county, my state, and everything. It's getting so much worse, and people will say anything now, and it just simply alarms me. I've said for years, maybe in 2 or 3 more generations they'll die off. That's not happening.
No. Thank you. Who else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Gloria Shinkawa, and I'm from Pflugerville, from where you are. Far, far away. I work with teenagers that have been arrested for the first time in North Travis County, and I think that the urgency for undoing racism is very important for our youth. Statistically, we're seeing a high number of minority students being arrested for the first time, and it is a challenge because this is hard for their future. And so the urgency is to try and do something about our justice system so that we don't have this problem of the minority youth getting into trouble.
My name is Emily Ling, and I go to Servant Church, and I work at a nonprofit that helps people in county jails and deals with mass incarceration issues. And why for me is largely because I would like to help the church do more to address justice issues, but I feel like racism is maybe the biggest thing that stops us from being able to do that within our own church. So we need to get together before we can do some of the work that I think we were called to be doing together. So.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Hall. I'm Director of Traditional Music at Breakout United Methodist Church. And undoing racism is important to me because something like this becoming the norm is just not right.
I think I forgot to say I'm also from Breakout United Methodist Church.
Thank you.
Yes. I'm Barbara Mason. I'm from University United Methodist Church. I'm a retired curriculum director, but what I do now is a lot of voter registration, and the why is because I really believe that if we're going to move forward as a country, as a state, that we have to have a more balanced power structure.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Barbara Buchan. I'm from Bethany United Methodist Church. I'm an engineer. I worked for 3M for 32 years. I've been pegged to be on a diversity committee because I'm a female engineer. But I'm here because I want to learn as much as I can to bring back to our committee to help 3M become a more diverse company and to work with that committee.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Ann Mund. I go to St. John's, also involved with the Rio, Texas chapter of the Methodist Federation for Social Action. And with all that's been happening lately, I'm back in touch with some of my own racism, and I want to learn. And I want to try to understand what it's like to be, that I want to learn as much as I can and do what I can to help.
Yes, sir.
My name is Frank Rojas, and I'm engineer data analyst now for IBM for many years. I'm about 1 year from retirement. I do a lot of mission trips, and I've been now doing 2 mission trips down to the valley. And why is this important and urgent? Because I've become aware of the stuff that's is happening that I wasn't aware, and I'm very passionate about relieving the pain of the marginalized. For me, it's not just race. I don't stick to race. Not all that are marginalized. So, I'm like, I just want to get involved more.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Hi, my name is Maria Sharp, and I am a dog trainer. The reason I'm attending this seminar is because I have a calling to plant a Hispanic church in Dripping Springs, and I thank God that I have not experienced racism personally and in the community, but nevertheless, I want to be able to understand and also potentially empower anyone in my community in the event of.
Okay, thank you. Was that your hand?
No, but my name is Louis Goodall. I'm retired. This workshop is important to me. This topic is important to me. I used to work for the University of Texas, and I work with public school educators and in cultural awareness and racism and this type of subject that I enjoy the work. That's why it's important.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Diane Lee. I'm a pastor of, I'm semi-retired, but because of my age, but I'm a pastor at Asbury, and I am a freelance book editor. And I already said Asbury. I've been sitting here trying to think, why is this important to me? And it's really hard for me. I'm finding it really difficult to put it into words. But this whole idea of white privilege is something that I think too many of us don't understand, and I think we need to understand it better. And another part of it for me is that I went through a period in my life when I was, I had a bankruptcy, lost my house, cancer scare, all kinds of stuff like that happened, and I was on welfare, and I saw that kind of look that it's not the same as racism, but it's kind of the same, and they're tied together, and that's the reason it's important to me, and I think it's important for our world to undo it.
Yeah. Well, you actually felt it, that judgment. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Trevor Harper, and I'm a television producer, and I go to First United Methodist downtown. And oversimplified is I just think it's, especially in this context of people of the church, it's really our duty to undo racism.
Okay.
We have to.
Thank you.
I'm Jerome Wilson. What I do, I am a full-time student at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary and a candidate for ordained ministry in this conference. Why undoing racism is important and urgent for me. I see racism as a sickness that's infected people and that it's harming everyone, whether they know it or not. Racism harms white people, black people, Asian, Latin. Everyone is suffering from it. And as Christians, as people that are called to follow the great healer, I think it's our job to be about medicating and curing sicknesses.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Pat Thomas. I'm an associate pastor at St. John's United Methodist in Austin. And I think why is because God tells us we should love others, as we heard this morning, even more than ourselves.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
My name is Brian Fitzgerald. I'm a deacon. I'm an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Church, and I serve as a chaplain at St. David's Hospital. Why this is urgent for me, I think in the same way as just in hearing the conversation. I don't want to participate or misuse power or position because of my vocation in a hospital where I work with all kinds every day. And unbeknownst to me, I may be practicing or privileging I guess preferential treatment for whatever is in here from what may have been implanted. We come across that. There's a lot of families we encounter that are cultures of God in some ways, and we present that to each other and be amazed how a chaplain can resonate with a staff or with a family. And the issue is to stay in the middle.
Thank you.
I'm John Elford, one of the pastors at University United Methodist Church. And if racism is not just about personal prejudice, but it's a huge, as Jarrell said, debilitating systemic problem for people of color and for whites, if the United Methodist Church is about transforming the world, then it seems like undoing racism ought to be really high on the list of that transformative work. It's not been. And I'm excited that it's, we're finally in 2016 starting this work up again in our conference.
Who to miss?
Or haven't gone? I'm Roberta Goodman. I'm the Methodist pastor to the Bertram community, and it is an important issue that's just always present in our family because we're a family of voluntary connections of great diversity rather than by blood. And my move to this place, where I had been in the valley for 12 years, in the hill country, it's much more vocal and out there and urgent, and it's not being addressed in the church adequately.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, my name is Charlotte Caples, and I am a consultant doing racial equity work in Austin and across the country. My background is in mental health and juvenile justice. I was a therapist in my former career. I have two reasons for why undoing racism is important and urgent to me. The first is very simply, we're dying. We are physically and spiritually dying from racism. We look at disparities, we look at disproportionality, and there's a role of racism in all of that. Some of you talked about the health disparities. We just have to do something different. Because I like my elders, and I like spending time with them, and I don't want them to die before they're supposed to of racism. The second is very selfish. I have two nieces and nephews. They are just cute as can be. My niece, Pasia, my nephew, Patrick, and they're the youngest of many. They're the youngest of many nieces and nephews. And as an aunt, it hurts me to hear Pasia come home from school and say she doesn't want to wear her hair in braids anymore. And, me and my sister kind of look and say, where'd you get that, baby? What happened? What did you say? Nothing. And she's 2. But she can't explain what was said to her or what happened to her. But we know that she experienced racism in some kind of way because we know she loves her beads. Because she will shake, 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 shake forever and a day, even, to get on our nerves. But she loves her beads. And to hear her say that she doesn't want to wear her hair in braids, it lets me know that she is experiencing something that is hurtful, that doesn't allow her to be who she is and who she wants to be. And to leave Patrick in a classroom and he screamed at the top of his lungs because he doesn't, this is a child who doesn't have a care in the world. You talk about facial expressions. 2-year-olds shouldn't be able to have facial expressions like that. But to hear him scream because he doesn't want to stay, it makes you wonder, what is going on in this classroom, this kindergarten, this preschool, that causes him that much torment that he doesn't want to be there. And so very selfishly, my family is my passion. I have older nieces and nephews, and we talk. And they have very explicitly talked about things that they have experienced in school, in neighborhoods, by police officers. In fact, a couple of days ago, Spirit just led me to call a cousin. I call him my baby cousin. He's my second cousin. He thinks that we're brothers and sisters. But he'll call me his big cuz. But something just led me to call him. And he was still wound up. He was like, I don't know why I didn't call you. I just didn't think to call you. And I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? He said, cuz, I went out to get something out the car. I was getting ready for work. And a police officer in my yard asking me where I'm coming from, what I'm doing. Put your hands up. And I just walked out my house to get my stuff together to go to work. And I got to deal with a cop in my yard asking me, talking about you been breaking into cars. It's my car. It's mine. He was going off, and he is known for his ability to go off. So it did not go well. He was taken to jail because he felt like he shouldn't have to answer for going to his car. Of course, he didn't do it. They didn't charge him with that, but he got charged with disorderly conduct because he didn't, in his words, bow down to the police officer. So incidents like that happen. We may never hear about it. In fact, when he talks about the attorneys and getting involved and doing something to change things, the feedback he gets is, well, there was no violence in that incident. Nobody was hurt, so it's not going to create a big stink. Well, the fact that his feelings was hurt, he missed a day of work, a day of providing for his children and his family, and just the whole dehumanizing piece that came with that is why I do this. That's why it's important to me. Thank you all for sharing. That is one of the things that keeps us connected, to know who is connected to you in some way, who may have some common interests. You learn things about people, and you may want to connect with them during breaks. So we have about 30 more minutes. I do want to respect the fact that you've been sitting for a long time. So you can take a 5-minute break, and we are going to come back and do an exercise. Well, this is that point in the workshop where you do a little bit of work. And so I'm going to ask you to take out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and I want you to draw these 9 dots on your paper. They don't have to be a donut. They can be solid dots. And so your instructions are to connect all 9 dots using 4 straight lines without lifting your pen or pencil from the paper. Some of you have done this exercise before. But don't remember it. Well, go ahead and try. It's no harm in trying. You got it? You know, pen? I got you. Got a pen for you. I do. Anybody else need pen or paper? So I'm going to give you a clue. You will actually have to put the pen on the paper. All 9 dots using 4 straight lines. And if you don't get it right the first time, you can draw yourself another set of 9 dots and start over.
That's what I don't want to do.
Never quite working towards perfection. We're not there yet.
And I know you might be struggling a little bit, but this is not a group activity. It is individualized work. So if you get it, keep your paper covered.
We're still coming with 5.
Oh, okay.
4 straight lines connecting all 9 dots without lifting your pen or pencil from the paper. It's a studious group. All right, so I see a couple of people have it. Would one of you 2 gentlemen come to the board and enlighten the rest of us? Either of you?
It took an engineer to do it.
Well, I can promise you, we've been in a room full of engineers where none of them got it.
It's about going outside the boundaries.
1, 2, 3, 3, 4. Bring it on up. Wow, give this man a hand. And he said, now I wanted to know, did your paper have lines on it? Like graph lines? Your paper? Huh. The interesting thing about a room full of engineers is if they do it on blank paper, they can't get it. But if it's lines on the paper, they tend to get it. Don't know why engineers are wired that way, but that's what we've witnessed in our workshops. So thank you. But you said something interesting. You said you had to go outside of the boundaries. What boundaries?
Well, the first time that I did this, I was just trying to stay in the box, and I couldn't do it inside the box, and then I saw the solution. And it was a long time ago, but I remember that it was, oh, I can go outside the boundary of the 9 squares.
So what box? Anybody else see a box? Who else saw a box? Can somebody show me the box? Because I'm having problems. Somebody come up and draw the box for me. Who saw a box? Come draw the box for me. Oh, a lot of y'all saw that box, huh? Why do we see a box here? Did I say anything about a box? So why do we see a box?
Our mind sees it.
Because you have patterns.
Patterns, what you're used to. So if you think, if I gave this activity to Paige and Patrick, do you think that they would have saw a box? Probably not. What do you think they would have done? Think they could have connected those 9 dots with 4 straight lines? My niece and nephew, the 2 and 3-year-old.
Yeah. I don't think they would have cared.
There've been a whole bunch of lines all over the place going on. Now, Paige is a little anal, so she would have been at least saying, Mom, Patrick just doing it all over the place. He not, So, hey, she's a little older. But no, they would have scribbled all over the place. They wouldn't have seen a box there. So what allows us to see a box? Because I didn't say a box, did I? How did we all get to see in a box? Okay, speak up.
It's just that's kind of how we've looked culturally. We've kind of come through certain standards, and seeing that box is uniform and standard.
Okay, standards.
And that's how you play that other game that has dots, that you just do the lines and
You put your
open the
initials in.
square and put your initial on that.
The dot game.
The dot game.
Previous experience on games.
Oh, learned behavior. What else? Why did we see a box there?
Safe.
It's safe.
We set up lines and barriers, kind of naturally.
Do we?
Divides.
Okay. We've all been socialized to see a box here. At 2 and 3, you don't see a box. They had to learn to see a box there. They've been conditioned, we've been conditioned to see a box here. I always have to wonder if I'm spelling right. We've been socialized to see a box here when there really isn't a box here. There's some things that we've been taught repetitively that we internalize and keep for ourselves. So who said they done this exercise before? 1, 2. So what was so hard about doing it the second time? Or third, fourth, fifth? What was so hard about it?
Just that memory, just didn't remember it.
Okay, didn't remember it. Huh?
No, I just reverted back to the original box thinking.
Yeah, we go back to what we know.
I remember doing it before, and I remembered that you had to go outside of those lines, but I didn't remember how.
So even when you knew that you had to go outside of the lines, you still could not make your mind do what you knew you had to do. That's some pretty strong stuff. Who else?
It was fuzzy, like I said, they remember it, and I remember the principle, I had to go outside the box. And I remember the picture, and it was funny, now that you draw the red, it's actually an arrow. And it says, it's a common shape, but I couldn't remember it until I did it a couple times on the paper, and then it came to me. It took a while.
Don't feel bad. I've been up in front of a room full of social workers doing this activity, and nobody got it. So then I had to draw it, and it was like, We've been socialized to see a box there, and it's very strong. And it was like, where's my paper? But so it's hard for us to get outside of boundaries that people have set up for us. So what type of boundaries do we have personally? I know my mama always told me as a child, look here, when we leave this house, you act like you got some sense. Don't you put your hands on nothing. Don't you ask for nothing. I'm not raising no heathen children. I had some very clear boundaries about how I was supposed to behave in public. What about you all? What type of boundaries?
We have spatial boundaries of, certain amount of space between us and the next person, and when they get too close, then we're uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I think mine are a little bit strange in that as a voice teacher now, where I take students from young and older, things like use your inside voice, don't do this, don't talk above this particular decibel level, and it's a boundary that actually harms. We discover later on, as they're adults, it actually harms the person vocally. If they want to sing, if they want to speak in public and be heard. Where, what if your microphone goes out? You don't have enough voice because you've been pulled into a boundary that says you can't talk above a certain decibel level. So you have never used that before, and so you can't anymore.
That's very true. My first workshop I did as a juvenile justice, I was doing some suicide prevention training to a room full of 200 to 300 boot camp instructors. And I didn't have a microphone. And I got up there with my lovely professional voice. Good morning, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And they were like, we can't hear you, speak up. I was like, wait a minute, you want me to use my country Mississippi voice? I got you. I was trained in a certain setting, you're supposed to speak a certain way. But in my household, we loud. But if I'm loud in some settings, I get labeled. And it is damaging, because now you're always questioning. Am I speaking at the right tone? Am I speaking at the right level for this group? You're never being yourself. You're trying to see where you fit. So we also have boxes in, yes, sir.
I was wondering if Mark also has a point, which he may not have meant to infer, but if a voice is suppressed enough, you get to the point where you don't speak.
You won't
Amen.
speak. You won't speak.
Amen.
Right.
Well, and I've been in so many meetings where, someone will be talking and no one wants to say anything. But like as soon as the one person speaks up, then people will feel comfortable speaking up. But it's sort of like, even when you ask people for them to speak up, they're so afraid to like put that out there, make themselves vulnerable. So I think like that piece of it, is we're socialized to make people feel comfortable. Like this morning she was talking about, being comforted and not being pushed. And so people don't want to put themselves out there and be vulnerable.
Yes, good. What other things keep us inside of our boxes? Okay. Well, what's polite?
Well, not speaking, because you want to give everyone else a chance.
Okay.
And so you don't let yourself be heard.
Okay. What else?
And you just feel safe. And the best example is, I taught my kids to be safe and to start with crossing the street, but then as teenagers, you said, just don't associate yourself with certain people. And then teaching them in Sunday school, I saw them basically back off from other kids that were starting to go into drugs and sex. And I was always saying, why aren't you, they're your friends, why aren't you with them? So, that sense of being safe, that message that I gave them.
Disconnected them in some sense.
I struggled with that place. Wanting to be safe.
Okay. In your workplaces, what keeps you inside this box, stepping outside of the boundaries?
You don't want to be that guy.
What's that guy?
That guy, the one that'll say something when everybody else is okay being quiet, or at least wait until the boss says something to everybody feels comfortable in saying it. You don't want to be that person that's viewed as different.
Okay. What else?
And in the workplace, you don't want to risk losing your job.
Amen. How does that work?
Well, doing something that HR says is not appropriate.
Okay. That goes into that fear thing. What else keeps us inside this box, functioning inside of a box? Okay, labeled and stereotyped. Okay. So if you had the absolutely best solution to a workplace problem, and you walked in Monday morning and said, I have the answer, this is it, this is what we're going to do, what do you think you would hear in return?
There's no problem.
There's no problem, so there's denial.
No, it won't work.
Won't work. Why won't it work?
Tried it before.
Tried it before.
What makes your way the right way?
What makes your way the right way?
It's not your job to think of.
Ooh, not your job. What else?
How about, thank you for your opinions, we'll take it under consideration.
My favorite one is, you don't have enough to do you, baby? Let me get you something else to do. What else? Money. We don't have the money to do that. And one other thing I'm looking for.
The fear of failing at it.
The fear of failing.
It's never been done before.
It's never been done before, and we don't have enough
Time.
These are pretty much the 4 things that keep us from going outside of this learned box. Not enough money. Just think about if you had the money, what you could do. If you had the time, what you would do. If you were not afraid of repercussions, what would you do? And you didn't have all these standards placed on you that you could do something different. Keeps us functioning inside of a box. We talked a little bit about accountability. And with accountability, these points become very important. They're outside of the box. This is what we call community, these points. When you do things in conjunction, in collaboration with community, they have your back. When you come into my neighborhood and want to do something, you work with me in my community and talk about something that we want to do, But then you go back to the workplace to say, hey, community came up with this plan. We want to try this, and you get some of these other answers. Community out here is what's going to allow you to step outside of. It was the thing that helped CPS be able to do the work, even to bring the workshop into Texas, is that there was a community constituency that was involved in looking at and analyzing the disproportionality and disparities for children of color. So if you ground and stabilize yourself in your constituents and work with them, they're going to keep you safe, so you don't have to worry about losing your job. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So anybody ever heard of this game or this toy? It was a box. It had a crank on the side. And it used to have this little tune. Dun, 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 dun. Now, why was he a weasel? Oh, when you get outside of the box, you're a weasel. What's a weasel?
A ferret. Rodents. That makes nice coats.
Not desirable. No. Untrusting. So when we say you do this work, sometimes people look at you as that jack in the box. And when you come in and you say, I have the greatest answer, and I believe we should undo racism because of, whatever my reason is, and you jump out of that box, people don't often see you as this great organizer who's come up with the best things. They see you as a weasel. They see you as sneaky. And most of the time when we come out of that box, do we come out all strong and assured of ourselves and know what we're doing? No. We come out all over the place. And so when people are looking at us, we don't look stable. Why should they follow us? We're all over the place. When we talked about the crank, it's not usually until an incident happens that gets us wound up and we get courageous enough to jump outside of that box. But what happens when you jump out of the box? What do we do to Jack? We just push him in? Start over again, winding them up all over again. Do we fold him up real nicely? And I say Jack, but you do know it's some Jackies that jump out of the box, right? Do we fold them back up and place them in there and say, now, Jackie and Jackie, get back in there. You know how we do things. Do we do that? What do? We shove them. We slam. The arm might not even be back in there. We just slam it on the arm anyway. And if you really in one of those situations, sometimes they snatch Jackie out the box. Mm-hmm. And that's when we talk about that job loss. We can just remove you from this box so you won't be a problem at all. And we talk about losing jobs as a way to stop organizing work, but there's another way. Get your promotion. You ever been doing some work that you knew was controversial and that was pushing the boundaries of the box? And then all of a sudden you were doing such a great job and we're going to give you a promotion. We're going to create a position for you. You ever seen that happen? What happens when you get a little bit more money? You get a little bit more what? You forget what you was doing in the first place. I got a little change in my pocket now. I ain't worried about y'all. You better get in where you fit in. Exactly. We get quiet. It silences us. Comfortable. With that new promotion, it becomes self-interest instead of a communal interest. And so when we talk about doing organizing work, we ask that you recognize that we all come to the table with boxes. Several boxes. I have my parents' box. I have my mom's box. I have my dad's box. They can look completely different. I have an education box. We all come to the table with an education box. We went to school, right? There was a certain way we were supposed to act in school. And we learned, or we didn't learn. And we didn't stay there very long. We have our work boxes. We have our community boxes. We have our church boxes. We all come to this table with a whole bunch of stuff. And that's not a bad thing. But in this work, we ask that you align your boxes with other people so that you're not by yourself jumping out that box, suffering repercussions. And that accountability piece, because if you get wound up, now we have a plan. We might have a plan about how we're going to address this issue. But if you get wound up and jump out on the box, you could sabotage everything for everybody. So that accountability piece to be able to pull somebody's coattail and help them stay according to plan. And that's what we do in our organizing work. We ask you to align your boxes with people in your community, people in your churches, to present a more stable front in organizing work. We all have our own individual passions. Unite those passions with others as you move forward in this work. So I gave you that activity just to lead you up to what it might be like to be in an Undoing Racism workshop. We are out of time. This is not a 2.5-day presentation where you would continue on. But just know, we ain't even talked about race yet, have we? It is a process to address systemic institutional racism. We recognize that there's cultural, linguistic, individual, and institutional racism that are very much a part of the worlds that we live in. And whether or not we believe in them, it's still a racist world, whether or not you buy into it or not. So with that being said, I just want to give you a few things that you can anticipate from being a part of a workshop. And basically that we want to develop a common definition of racism and an understanding of those different forms. We want to develop a common language and analysis for examining racism in the U.S. We want to actually understand our own connection to racism and the work that has to be done. We want to take a look at and understand why people are poor and the role that institutions play in poverty, institutional racism for people of color and communities of color. We also learned the historical context for how race classifications in the U.S. were developed and how they're actually maintained today. We said, what was it, 1892? When we first, the anthropologists, was it 1892 when we came up with race? I don't know, it's been a long time, but it's still functioning here. There's a historical context of how we came to be. We also want to understand how all of us, including white people, are adversely impacted by racism every day and everywhere. A lot of times when we think about racism, we think about that poor community or that community of color over there. But again, we believe everybody has been dehumanized by race and racism. Because white people didn't come to this country as being white, did you? What were your ancestors before they got here? Might have been Indians, Italian, Irish, but there's a concept of white, not necessarily what you came to this country has. So there was a process of giving up some things. And then we believe that giving that culture and that heritage up was very dehumanizing for white people as well. We want to look at some assumptions about how your work, what you do in your job or your role is or is not affected by racism. And we want to develop some awareness and understanding about how to begin to undo racism. We focus on these things in the Undoing Racism workshop. We also gain knowledge about how to be more effective in your work with your constituencies. I say constituencies, and sometimes people don't understand. So if you're the pastor, the congregation is your constituency. If you're a nonprofit organization and you go into a community, that community is your constituency. And how much can those people hold you accountable in the work that you do? We want to understand the role of community organizing and building effective multiracial coalitions as it means for undoing racism. We believe that everybody has to be a part of this work. Black people and people of color can't do it alone. There's a power structure in place that requires that white people participate in this movement as well.